Theatre, film, TV and more. Suzy Wrong reviews it all on Joy Drive with Em and Warren.
Suzy Wrong, welcome back to Joy Drive.
Thank you. Hi, Em. I heard recently someone say that it's cool to be kind.
Yes. I mean, I've heard that many times. I think it is cool to be kind.
How long have you heard that? Because for a Gen Xer, it's a bit of a new phenomenon.
I feel like there's a song, right? There's a song that's like, it's cool to be kind in the right middle, do.
Oh, I'm unfamiliar with that. But I love the concept.
Even if you knew that song, I'm pretty sure my rendition would not help you know that song. Do you know what I mean?
I love that concept, especially after watching
Oh my
this
gosh,
week's show.
yes.
You know, like these days, like we have language like feeling safe and holding space, which, you know, like we never spoke like that back in the day. And watching this week's show made me think about my school days. Obviously, you know, it was nothing quite as dramatic, but it was pretty miserable. And I think the missing ingredient was that we weren't taught as children to be kind. Yeah.
Well, let's unpack it because there's quite a bit to unpack. What did we watch this week?
Oh, Alice is a cellist of world renown, but Jo is still struggling to get her career as a writer off the ground. Things went so disproportionate 10 years ago when both arrived at Silver Creek with scholarships for a 1-year wilderness program at the Red House boarding school for teenage girls. Australian writer Rebecca Stafford's novel Bad Behaviour is now a 4-part series on Stan. Most of the plot involves the girls' younger days at Silver Creek, where intolerable cruelty takes place amongst the teenagers. It's like Mean Girls on steroids, with alpha female Portia orchestrating most of the horrible goings-on. Alice, the only Asian and non-white person, ends up at the bottom of the pile. Things get so bad that she lights herself on fire. We see Jo abandoning Alice to side with the aggressors, not only because she's a weak individual, but also because she's got the hots for Queen Bee Portia. Teenage lust plays a big part of the dynamics at Silver Creek, but thankfully the only sex scene in Bad Behaviour is of characters as grown-ups 10 years after school. I think it's a story that's worth telling, the age-old problem about bullying, about girls ganging up to be terrible to one another. It's a perennial lesson that is always needed in every generation. 4 episodes, however, prove a little too generous for Bad Behaviour. There is a lot of repetition, mainly of shenanigans that are just unpleasant to watch. Character development stalls after a while, and some of the nastiness just becomes gratuitous. It is well directed, though, by Corey Chen, and performances are strong across the board. Em, would you have liked it better if it's reduced to a 2-hour movie?
Yes, I think so. Because as you mentioned, it just gets to a point where you're like, it's genuinely painful to watch. I don't know. Like I was watching it in a couple of different environments. You know, often I'll watch the stuff that we have for homework on the tram. So, you know, in previous iterations of our chats, I've cried on the tram because things have been really beautiful or heartwarming or whatever. And I'm okay with that. I'm okay to show emotions on trams. That's totally fine. But this, wherever I was, it didn't even matter the environment. On the tram, at home, you know, on a lunch break, I was just always in such a bad mood after I stopped watching it. It just, there was, and I don't know if that's a good thing. Like maybe because it was well made, it made me feel things and therefore, you know, that's a good series. But genuinely, it just made me feel a bit ick, like just yuck, like the whole time. And there was no light and shade. Like it was all shade. We were just in the dark.
It is very icky. I found myself, like, the way I deal with these things is that I emotionally get shut off. I just like disconnect. And, because I know I have my responsibility on my Tuesday chats, I kind of keep my eyes on the screen, but really I found my emotions just kind of shut off. It just couldn't connect because it was just too dark for too long, I think. And you kind of also knew, because it kept repeating, you kind of knew that, oh, it's not going to get better, is it?
No, exactly. And like at the end, I'm kind of like, what was the point?
Yeah, I would have really liked if they explored a lot more about the psychology of what was happening. I think they kind of tried to unpack a bit of the sexuality, but they were a bit coy with that. But I thought Portia's psychology was really important. I thought Joe's psychology was really important. Why was Portia being so terrible? And why was Joe so easily manipulated? I would have liked to understand those things a bit. I think those things weren't explained thoroughly enough. I think with 4 episodes, they probably could have made those things a bigger part of the experience. And for me, that would have been more interesting than to see the abuse happening over 4 episodes.
Absolutely. Because, maybe, I don't know, 5 minutes to 10 minutes in one of these episodes could have been Portia's backstory, who is the bully of the series. I have no idea why someone would be that horrible to anyone and for such a prolonged time. And it wasn't just Joe, it was so many other people. And I just do not understand the motivations of that character at all. And as you mentioned, I also don't understand why Joe isn't like, this is a year of this and it's not getting better. It doesn't change. And of course, you can't blame someone for being in that situation, but I'd like to understand like why it went the way that it did. But I don't know. At the end of it, I didn't feel any resolution.
I think it was so convincing, right? It gives you a sense of intrigue and you want to know why. Why do kids behave that way? And I guess, I don't know about your teenagers, but for my teenagers, I definitely did see versions of that. I don't think I've witnessed any kind of that kind of violence, but I did see how people really got off on ganging up and the bullying stuff, bullying as groups. And I thought it would have been good to get into that a bit more. I mean, I don't want to take away from the quality of work that's on the screen. Like, I thought it was, a lot of the imagery was, very beautifully composed and, the pace of it was strong enough so that, like I said, I didn't sort of, get bored. And you kind of knew the characters well enough. Like you weren't confused about what was happening. You weren't confused about who was doing what to whom. So all that stuff was done well. Like I guess maybe perhaps in a technical way, and the performances were strong. I love that. They didn't have to go through a lot of, makeup or costume, manipulations to sort of make you see them 10 years later.
Yeah.
Like the actors looked convincing as teenagers and as young adults. That all that stuff was good, and all the acting I thought was really compelling. Portia, which is a horrible character, like she was really, really believable. Like the way that her eyes work. It's a really good sort of, I think she did really well as an actor to portray those horrible scenario. But then you want to talk about why.
Absolutely. We are chatting about Bad Behavior, which is currently streaming on Stan. To Portia, I wanted to see some growth from that character. Because basically in this series, you go from their high school year and it kind of cuts to present day and it's kind of, they're 10 years out of high school or whatnot. And I feel like she was just exactly the same person, but just had
I think that's accurate though. I think
right.
We want people to have growth, but 10 years actually for some people isn't a very long time. And it almost looks like whatever problems she has, they are so sort of fundamental to that personality that, it's almost unrealistic to think that, someone comes back and she's remorseful and she's a changed woman, but actually she isn't. The look in her eyes are the same. And I think that for me, that feels real, Yeah, and I just think her performance was really good.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, for me, we started this chat by me saying, I didn't really appreciate that there wasn't any light and shade. It was really all just shade. And it absolutely was. Like there was just not a moment, not a single minute of this show where you can go, sweet relief, we're in a moment of happiness. There just wasn't. There was no moment of happiness. But again, and I said this before, but maybe that's the idea. Like maybe that's how we're supposed to feel walking away from this series. Maybe we're supposed to be like, well, a bully's a bully and they're always going to be a little bit terrible.
Yeah, I Googled it a little bit and it does say that it's a memoir. So I guess it's based on the writer's real experience. So maybe she is giving it, a lot of integrity by not sort of dressing it up too much.
That is true.
Yeah. And, it's a good lesson to know. Like some people are terrible and they will remain terrible. And if you want them to come back 10 years later and apologize to you, then that's not going to happen.
Well, look, it certainly didn't make me happy, but it certainly was well put together, and it definitely was bad behavior. We started the chat by me singing a really bad rendition of a song about being cruel to be kind, and Roxy Doxy has messaged in saying the song is called Cruel to be Kind. So it does exist, Suzy.
No, I meant that it's cool to be kind.
Oh.
Yeah. Back in my day.
I see exactly what I've done here.
Back in my day, no one ever said that it's cool to be kind, or maybe they said it and I never heard it. And I think it's such an important lesson, it's such a simple thing to sort of teach people, grown-ups and kids that, it doesn't cost you very much. Just be kind. Just be kind to people.
Okay, so it's the exact opposite of the song. But I'm such an optimist that I've listened to that song many times and I always thought it said, it's cool to be kind.
But all these years you thought it was cool to be kind.
Yes, Roxy Doxy in this moment has just changed my life. It's Cruel to be Kind is a totally different song. But it's the one I've been listening to.
It's so good to be optimistic.
Well, I'm optimistic about next week. What are we watching next week?
Victorian Queens is now available on ABC iView and on Apple TV. It is a new documentary about 4 diverse drag queens from Melbourne and Geelong. The perfect show for when I drop into the studio for the first time from Sydney next week.
Oh my gosh. I cannot wait, Suzy. That's going to be so exciting. We're going to have to get a lot of content. It's going to be so fun. So Victorian Queens is what we're watching next week.
That's right. On ABC iView and Apple TV. And I'll see you next Tuesday.
You really will see us in person.
Yay!
How exciting. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye.
That's Suzy Wrong, our theatre, TV and film reviewer here on Joy Drive. And you heard it here first, live in studio next week.